Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Wright. I'm a landscape photographer working out of Granada, Spain. Now, this last week saw the Perseid meteorite showers, and of course, sod's law being what it is, we've got temperatures of around 40 degrees in the daytime here in Spain, and on the night that I had earmarked to shoot the meteor showers, we had cloud cover. So galling, but there it is. So anyway, what I thought I would do is make the best of a bad job in any case and do some astrophotography. So I went out with some friends. We went into the Sierra Nevada and to a fairly remote location where it was deathly quiet. It was absolutely beautiful. It was so lovely. Weather was fantastic. It was much cooler up there. Clear skies and a perfect night for astrophotography. So I got a couple of nice pictures and I thought it might be useful to share my setup with you guys, and let's have a look. So this is a Canon R5 Mark II. It's got a 16 to 35mm lens on it. I use the 16mm end, so you need as wide an angle as you can get your hands on effectively. You want as much sky as possible in the shot. Now, any DSLR, any mirrorless camera is going to do a pretty good job of this. It doesn't have to be the Canon R5, doesn't have to be the latest and greatest. But there are settings that we're going to have a look at in a minute. Now, the other parts of this are, I've got a tripod here that is made by Faisal, a Swiss company, carbon fiber tripod, and it is rock solid. And what you'll notice is there is no center column. And I chose this deliberately. I may have mentioned this before, but I absolutely detest center columns. They invariably introduce some degree of wobble into the proceedings. On top of that, I've got an Acrotech leveling head, which is this lower part, and an Acrotech panoramic head, which is the upper part. Now, the reason I use this is pretty straightforward. The leveling head, you want, even because you're shooting in the dark, but you still want your horizon to be straight. So you use your leveling head to set the camera level, and you can then check that in camera to fine tune it. But the real gist of it here is the part of the panoramic head, which means that I can rotate the camera and get it to exactly where I need it to be in terms of that, and I can lock it off. And this is so much better an arrangement than a ball head. Ball heads, I have actually got an Acrotech ball head, and I've used this head almost 100% of the time in preference. For me, this is an absolutely perfect landscape photography camera setup. Anyway, be that as it may. So what you're going to need is, you're going to need your tripod, you need a camera, wide angle lens. You probably want to have a remote shutter release, or you can set the camera to take the photograph some seconds after you press the shutter. So the reason I'm saying this is because what we're going to do is we're going to take a sequence of 10 to 14 pictures, and they have got to be exact, because what happens later in software is that the software will compensate for the Earth's rotation. So it's really important that in order to do this properly and not cause problems in the rest of the photograph, that the software is able to predictably map the stars onto one another. Otherwise you're going to get a horrible looking photograph. Okay, so there's that. Now, the other things that I wanted to mention, turn image stabilization off. I've got, some cameras can detect a tripod, Canon cameras can't. So turn image stabilization off, because what happens is that the seeking for perfect steadiness can resonate into the tripod, and it sets up basically an increasing amount of movement in your shots. You want to eliminate that completely. Other things, I set a custom white balance. Most people recommend something around about 4,200, but really what you want is, effectively you want a sort of neutral colour to begin with, because you're going to go into processing and you can have the option to change that. What you don't want is a white balance that gives you a heavy colour cast, because it's a nightmare to get rid of. So go for the most neutral one you can. I use 4,200. And I set that because even though it's dark when you're taking those photographs, the camera, if it's on automatic white balance, is prone to making small changes in that white balance. Yes, it's unbelievably sensitive, and that's fantastic. Will it mess up your shots? Yes. Okay, so switch, get your custom white balance going. Other thing to turn off is the long exposure noise reduction. And the reason we're turning off long exposure noise reduction is because we're actually going to do this ourselves in the processing. So the broad description of what we're going to do is we're going to set our camera up, we're going to take our 14 or so shots, then we're going to put the lens cap on, take another shot with exactly the same setting. This is called a black frame. And when we put this into software, it will use the black frame to get rid of any sensor noise that's happening in those photographs. Now, we don't want to use sort of normal noise reduction, because in doing that, we're going to get rid of stars inevitably. Not perhaps all of them, but I like to have some control over that. So this gives me a means of getting rid of what is in fact a predictable pattern, because as the sensor gets hotter, as it will do towards the end of your 15 second exposure times 20, the incidence of these little hot pixels will become more, and this is one way of really helping to minimize that. Okay, this week I'll just mention now, this video is being sponsored by me in the guise of my company 8 Peaks Photography. Now what we do is we set up customized and personalized photography tours in the Iberian Peninsula in Spain for people. We've got 4 tours scheduled for next year. Have a look at the website, which is at the end of this little promotional film here. By the way, this film was shot on the location that we did the astrophotography stuff with this week. Okay, all right. Okay, so we've set up the standard settings of the camera. Now we want to set up the shutter speed, aperture and ISO. So first thing to point out here is that basically all the rules of photography as you know it, and all the stuff that you really pay attention to up until this point, if you haven't done astrophotography before, all of that goes out the window. We're breaking all of the rules here. So what we do is because of the way that we're processing it, a lot of the idea of get it right in camera doesn't apply as much. It does apply a little bit, but you know, your composition and everything have obviously got to be spot on, but the exposure and all of that, not so much. So there are various rules, and some of them work and some of them don't. So the one that I use is called the 500 rule. And to establish the number of seconds that you're going to leave the shutter open for, I divide 500, it's the 500 rule, by 16, which is the widest focal length of the lens that I'm using. Now, what that gives me is a 31 seconds exposure. Now, I know from experience, and I think this is a modern sensor thing, I know for sure 31 seconds is way too long. It will give you, as you zoom in, it will give you, it'll record the fact that the stars have moved in the time that you've had the shutter open. So 30 seconds, way too long. Personally, I'd prefer to go for about 15 seconds, perhaps even shorter than that, but you need to get it to a point where it's as sharp as you can reasonably expect a star to be. And the reality of the situation is we're on this spinning globe, and when you do astrophotography, it becomes surprisingly obvious just how much we're moving in relation to the rest of the galaxy. So, you know, bear that in mind. So we're going for about 15-second exposures. This is like a ballpark. Your aperture, you need to set to the widest possible setting. We want to get as much light as possible. It doesn't, depth of field is not a concern. We're shooting something that is thousands of miles away. Really, don't worry about depth of field. It's really not going to be an issue. So, widest possible setting. ISO is an interesting one because the R5 does demonstrate a degree of ISO invariance. And what ISO invariance means is that as you pump up the ISO, it doesn't add noise to the picture. Now remember how this works. ISO is effectively an accelerator to a volume control, if you like. It doesn't, the noise is not a function of the ISO. It's not ISO that introduces noise. The noise is already in the photograph. ISO simply amplifies it. So noise is a function of darkness, effectively. So with most Canon cameras, however, they have ISO variance, which means that the amount of noise visible in the photograph will be increased the more you turn the ISO up. Nikon ISO invariant, so that's the difference. So with the R5, we're not too bothered about it, and what we will try to do is to set the ISO anywhere between 1600 and 3200, depending on what the picture looks like on the back of the camera or in the viewfinder if you're using the viewfinder. Okay, so I generally start low and move it up higher on the night. Some nights are brighter than others, and a big part of this actually is sometimes there is the presence of a moon. It might not be in your shot, but it will have an effect on the shot. Okay, so we're out on the mountain. Let's take the shot. Now, I'm going to do another couple of videos about this. So what I'm going to tell you now is how to take the basic shot, and I'll give you a pointer to what we're going to cover in a future video. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is to take a sequence of shots. We need to take them quite close together, and they are, we've already set the shutter speed. The critical thing here is you don't want to delay too much before you trigger the second, the third, the fourth and the fifth shot. They should all run together. And the reason for that is because of the Earth's rotation. We don't want that pattern to change radically. All right, so set the camera up, focus on the brightest star. Now remember that it makes very little difference whether something is 3,000 miles away or 3,500 miles away. That's not the point. Find a star that's bright and focus on that. Don't trust your lens to have the infinity setting in the right place. Very few of them do, in my experience, and I've ruined some perfectly good shots by relying on the infinity setting. So focusing on infinity, don't bother. Focus on the brightest star instead. And once you've got that, set up your shot. Now we're going to deal with the foreground shot separately, but typically what I will do is we're now concentrating on doing the sky. So set the shot up, set the composition up. You'll have your Milky Way going diagonally up across the screen if you're photographing in Europe. And fire off, I would say, at least 10 shots, somewhere between 10 and 20 shots. Now the reason we're doing these multiple shots is we've already turned off noise minimization. Now what happens in software, which I'm going to demonstrate in a minute, is that when you layer these 14, 15, 16 shots together, it does an excellent job of eliminating the noise as a function of that layering. Okay, so it's much better to do it this way because it will not remove the stars, and that gives us control over ultimately how many of the stars do we want to remove. I wouldn't personally leave that to noise reduction in software to randomly do that, because stars look a lot like noise on to a machine. Okay, so we've taken our 16 shots, whatever it happens to be. Let's take those into the studio. I'm going to use DxO PhotoLab 8 for this demo, but it's exactly the same in Adobe Lightroom. So what we're doing is we've got 14 pictures, and I've got a black frame as well. Now I'll talk about the black frame a little bit later, but let's first of all get these ready to be processed here. So we want to go into Customize. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to apply, these may look like black frames, but trust me, they're not. They are slightly underexposed. I think if I was doing this again, I would do a different ISO setting, but let's bring up. So we're taking it up 2 stops, 1.5 stops roughly, and we want to turn down the highlights just a little bit, give it a little bit of definition like that. Don't do anything with clear view or any of that sort of stuff. This is just basic stuff. So here it looks to me to be quite orange, so let's just pump that up so we can see much more clearly what's going on. And I'm going to make that a bit colder. Okay. And rescue that exposure. Okay, so that's probably enough for the stacking software to do its job, right? We're going to do most of the most of the corrections afterwards. Now, one thing I want you to notice here is that just around here there is a meteorite or some such thing passing through the frame in that 15 seconds. Now that will be removed by the process. Now what we need to do is to copy that those values across all of the other pictures. So we're going to go copy correction settings, and then we're going to go one, and we're going to copy all of it, including the black frame. Okay, so image, paste correction settings, paste all correction settings, there we go. Okay, so you can see those all happening. Now, what we've got now is a set of pictures with exactly the same settings. Alright, so this one I need to rotate. Okay, so we're going to do rotate left to bring that into the same orientation. Now what we're going to do is we're going to output all of these pictures as TIFFs. So select all, and we're going to go export, and that put 16-bit, let's make it 16-bit. Destination, I'm going to change the destination, so custom folder. Astro, we don't want to resize, the resolution is fine. Longest size. No, we don't want to resize them. Okay, so that's fine, I'm going to go with that. So let's export them. Okay, and we're going. Okay, so now we're going to open a new piece of software. This software is called Starry Landscape Stacker. And go to the desktop, DxO Astro, here are my pictures, okay? So what I'm going to do is select all of those TIFFs. They're all pretty big files, and open them up in Starry Landscape Tracker. Now there's another software that if I was using Windows, there's a software called I think Sequator, which I'll put in the description down below, so you can, if you're Mac, this is Starry Landscape Stacker is the best one to use. Okay, 14 light frames and 1 dark frame, so it's going to remove much of the noise. Okay, now the red dots here tell us what it is considering to be the sky. So we can either add more red dots or we can erase red dots, but what we're looking for, we pretty much got it. We might have to fill a little bit in, so we'll find the sky. So it's creating a mask, and it has missed some up here. So what we do is we just paint these areas in. Okay, because what it does behind the scenes is that effectively it makes a mask for the foreground, which in this picture is very indistinct, but it is there. It makes a mask for the foreground and it moves the sky separately, so it saves us a whole lot of heavy lifting. Okay, so we're going to go straight for Align and Composite. And we're going to keep it on the default settings. And that is the composited photograph, right? So save the image. There we go. Save. And it's going to save the mask as well. So there's 2 files that go in there. And we're not going to use the mask in this particular exercise, but what we are going to do is we're going to go back into PhotoLab, go into Photo Library, and bring that composited image back. It's this one. Okay, so there it is. And now we can just add a few finishing touches. So let's come back here. We want a bit more exposure there. I'd say so. We want to lift the shadows a little bit. Blacks. You see there's quite a lot of noise here. A little bit of contrast to bring that Milky Way out. Okay, and I want to change the make this more blue, sort of bluey green. That's pretty much. Was okay. It's a little bit sort of greenish. As neutral as we can get it. That's about it. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is go out to Nik Collection, go to Color Effects, and I'm going to put a local adjustment on here. And this will be, oops, get this aligned with the Milky Way, bring it much tighter in there. Oops. Okay, and I think here we just need to have a look and see what that's going to give us. So it brings it out a little bit more. Increase the saturation a bit. A little bit of warmth, and then down here. Okay, so good, there we go. So let's take that back. And now I want to just crop it because we've got a lot of useless foreground in here. So let's get the crop tool. We want sort of 4x5, 5x4, and let's take that all the way up there and close. Okay. This is a JPEG. Okay, and we want. We don't want it to be full size, do we? 032160 and export. Okay, so that shows us the basics of how this stuff is done. Okay, it's been quite a long video. Thanks very much for watching. And we'll see you, if you're interested in astrophotography, we'll see you next month, about 4 weeks' time. The next video will come out, and otherwise, we'll see you next week. Do give us a like or a tick if this video has been useful. Give us a like down below, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to do a whole series on astrophotography. It's one of those things that is deceptively difficult to get this right, simply because you're not working in camera as such, but I think we've shown that you can get an image out relatively straightforwardly, and what we're going to do is to move on to more advanced processing, and we'll move on to putting objects in the foreground, so we've got a much more effective composition. So on this particular occasion all I had was a mountainside, which was far from ideal. But we'll do some different shots and we'll process those. We'll bring Affinity Photo to play, and all good. Okay, so give us a like down below, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, do subscribe. That's fantastic. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.